The stream ran low that summer, no longer singing, just whispering over stone like a secret half forgotten. Eleanor crouched in silence, hands chilled by the water, pail resting against her knee. Her breath misted faintly in the air, though it was nearly midsummer. Something about the forest paused. The cottage stood behind her, crooked and half covered in ivy. A poor thing long surrendered by the village tithesmen and untouched by the Lord's riders. Her husband had died 2 winters ago, a fever, fast and burning. The priest had prayed, the midwife had shrugged, and by morning she'd been a widow with no coin, no child, and no patron. She could have fled to the abbey or begged her sister for bread. But Eleanor had stayed. She clung to the land the way ivy clings to stone, not because it offers comfort, but because it offers purpose. The soil had grown mean, the thatch thin, and the road to town was more rumor than path. But she endured, as stubborn things do. That morning, a kestrel wheeled above the treetops, slow and deliberate. She lifted her eyes to follow its flight, and saw something lying near the stone ridge, a shape that didn't belong. She rose cautiously, every muscle speaking the aches of hard work and harder seasons. At first, it looked like a bundle of cloth, half covered in fern. Then she drew closer, and her heart gave a jolt. A man. He lay slumped against a moss-covered boulder, his head tilted to one side, jaw streaked with dried blood. His surcoat was torn and stained, the crest upon it scorched and unrecognizable. One arm bent awkwardly under him, and the leather around his forearm was slick with something dark. His sword, broken in 2, lay beside him. His breath came faint and shallow. He was no peasant. The fine stitching on his sleeve, the polished, though now cracked, mail under the gambeson, the ring barely clinging to his right hand, all of it spoke of rank. A knight, perhaps, or the remnant of one. Eleanor's breath caught. Every tale whispered in firelight flickered through her mind, of men loyal to fallen lords, of deserters hunted through wood and field, of widows murdered for less than a crust of bread. Her fingers tightened on the handle of the pail. She could walk away. No one would know, no one would care. But the man groaned, a sound so low and broken it felt almost inhuman. Not a threat, not a trap, just pain, plain and weary. Her gaze drifted to the water in the pail, still catching what little light the morning offered. There wasn't much of it left. Not in the bucket, not in the well back home, not in her own hope. Still, she stepped forward. Kneeling beside him, she dipped her fingers into the cool water and brushed them gently across his lips. His skin was fever hot. His eyes fluttered open, wild and distant, and met hers. For a moment, they simply stared, neither friend nor foe, just 2 souls caught in the hush of the wood. Then he swallowed. She held the rim of the pail to his mouth, letting a trickle pass between his cracked lips. His throat moved once, twice. Then he sighed, long and low, as if he'd been holding that breath since the world broke. She did not speak. Words would only echo here. Instead, she set the pail beside him and rose. As she turned back toward her cottage, her feet light on the moss, she heard nothing behind her but the soft rasp of the night's breath, still alive, still holding on. That night, sleep did not come. The wind scratched at the shutters. The hearth barely held a glow. And sometime near dawn, she felt it before she heard it, a pressure in the earth. Distant at first, then nearer, the beat of hooves. Not one, many. Crossing the wildlands straight toward her gate. The morning broke not with birdsong, but with silence too heavy to name. Eleanor stood in the doorway, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the rise beyond the fields. The mist clung to the grass, silver and low. Somewhere deep in the valley, a hound barked once. Then nothing. And then came the hooves. Not galloping, steady, deliberate, like judgment on horseback. She stepped onto the porch, one hand brushing against the old hunting bow that still hung from its nail. She hadn't strung it in years. It offered no real protection. Only the shape of it comforted her, as if the past could still be worn like armor. The first rider came into view just past the hedgerow, tall in the saddle, draped in dark cloth, helm casting shadow over his face. Then another beside him, then 4 more behind. Their horses moved without sound, as though even the beasts had been trained in silence. No pennants flew, no words were spoken, yet their presence thundered louder than war drums. They encircled the cottage slowly, not as a threat, but as a claiming. She was being judged, weighed. And then she saw him. He rode at the front, upright despite the pallor in his face. The man she had found near the stream, the knight. His mail was hastily patched, the wound on his arm still wrapped in linen stained rust red. Yet he moved with calm authority, as though he had never fallen. He dismounted without help. The others did not follow. They waited, watching, waiting for his word. Eleanor's heart pounded so loud she feared they could hear it. Still, she didn't move. She met his gaze as he approached, every step marked by a quiet limp. He stopped 3 paces from her. For a long moment they stood in stillness. The wind stirred her hem. His hair fell across one cheek. There was no sword in his hand, no command on his lips. Then, in a voice roughened by smoke and silence, he spoke just one word. Safe. He turned his head to the others, men who bore the same burnished leather, the same crest half faded on their shoulders, and gave a command she couldn't understand. Whatever he said, it shifted the air. One by one, the riders lowered their weapons. A few nodded. One touched his chest with a fist. And then, like shadows uncast, they turned their mounts and rode away, wordless as they came, all but him. He remained. Without asking, he passed her, walked slowly toward the edge of the barn, and sank into the shade beneath its eaves. There, he sat, back against the beam, hands resting loosely on his knees. His eyes closed, as if he belonged there, as if he had always belonged there. Eleanor stayed on the porch. The chill of the earth had not left her bones. The village would call her cursed if they knew. They'd say she'd taken in a blade-bound ghost. A man cast out, a sword waiting to be drawn again. Some would call her mad. Others would call her traitor. But none had come to help her. None had asked if she slept through the winter cold or starved in the spring famine. None had offered their hand when the roof first caved. Only he had remained. She looked down at the bough still hanging by the door and thought of her husband's hands, how they used to string it for her when she was younger, when love still felt like warmth and not absence. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, not looking at the man. He did not answer. The reeve, the townsfolk, they'll come asking. And if they find you here... Still no reply. "I gave you water," she added. "Not shelter, not this." At last his eyes opened. "You gave life," he said, voice low. "And what? Now you owe me?" He considered that. "I repay what is sacred, until you are safe." Eleanor shook her head, almost laughed, dry and bitter. "You're as stubborn as every knight I ever heard tale of." He almost smiled. Almost. 3 days passed. Though time felt uncertain in that hush between danger and silence. Sir Caedmon, for she now believed that was his name, though he had never spoken it, slept beside the barn, rose with the dawn, and moved through her grounds, like he was tending a vow. He never entered her home, never asked for food. Yet each day she found something done. A rotted plank replaced on the fence, her garden bed weeded, the axe freshly sharpened. He moved like a man trained to obey, yet nothing about him felt servile, only watchful. Each time she tried to stop him, he replied the same way. "You gave, I return." On the fourth morning, she journeyed into the village, a rare and careful thing. She wore a dark cloak, kept her hood up, and made no eye contact as she walked the road past the chapel ruins, past the mill where the wheel no longer turned. Children stopped playing when they saw her. One woman crossed herself. Another pulled her daughter behind a market stall. Inside the provisioner's shop, the air thickened. "Eleanor," said the tanner's wife, too sweet to be kind. "Didn't expect to see you." She nodded, said nothing, reached for a sack of flour. "Strange times," the woman added. "They say there's been movement near the borders. Armored men passing through. Rumors of old banners, old names, stirring again." A man near the back grunted. "Or traitors hiding in woodlands where no one dares ask questions." Eleanor's hand stiffened on the coin. Another voice muttered, "Widows keep strange company when they live too long alone." The shopkeep didn't speak. He took her coin and handed her the flour, but didn't meet her eyes. Outside, the sky had dimmed, stormless yet tense. As she passed the chapel, she paused beneath the ruined arch, a place once holy, now abandoned to ivy and pigeons. She didn't pray. She hadn't since the funeral. Instead, she looked up at the remnants of the altar where once her marriage vows had echoed, and whispered, "He was dying. What would you have had me do? Let him rot like a wolf in a trap?" There was no answer from the stones, only silence. Back at the cottage, the knight was kneeling near the fire pit, tending a quiet flame. He rose when he saw her, offered no questions, only watched her with steady calm. She unwrapped the flour and set it on the table outside. "They think I've taken a lover," she said flatly. "A dangerous one." He didn't flinch. "They think I'm a traitor for helping you, that I lie with you under my roof." Still, he didn't move, only the smallest tilt of his head. "And you don't have anything to say to that?" His voice came quiet. "Words are smoke." That surprised a breath from her, almost a laugh. "Easy for you to say. You weren't raised to care what a churchman thinks of your name." He looked to the woods. "You gave water to a dying man. That is root, not shame." His gaze returned to her, and there was something ancient in it, something that weighed things by older scales. "In my order, a woman who gives water is a keeper of the sacred. It is the beginning of covenant. It binds spirit to spirit." Eleanor said nothing. Her mouth had gone dry. "You gave what cannot be repaid," he added. She turned toward the door, then hesitated. "You speak like someone who's buried more than comrades." His eyes darkened. He turned back to the fire. The moment passed. That night the wind shifted. It carried the smell of iron and smoke. And not long after, voices crept through the dark. Boards creaked. Something moved beyond the tree line. Not wolves, not wind. Eleanor rose from bed, bare feet brushing cold stone. She took her husband's bow from the wall, though no arrow was nocked, no string pulled taut. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows. Then came the hiss of straw igniting. A burst of orange light through the shutters. The henhouse. Flames licked up like fingers. And then, a man's voice slurred by drink. "Come out, witch. We're doing you a kindness." Another voice. "Where's your knight now?" The barn doors flew open, but they didn't see him coming. Sir Caedmon moved not with rage, but with terrifying precision, silent as falling snow, sudden as thunder. A groan, a cry. One man dropped his torch. Another staggered back with breath knocked from his chest. The brand meant for her skin lay in the dirt, still glowing. By the end of it, 4 men crawled through the ash and fled into the dark, limping. One remained unconscious. The knight said only this, "I stay until all danger sleeps." Eleanor didn't answer. But when she stepped closer to him, just enough for their shadows to touch, she realized, for the first time in 2 winters, she did not feel alone. By morning, the henhouse was a blackened husk. Feathers still floated in the breeze, drifting like ash. Eleanor salvaged what she could. A few shaken hens, 1 bent iron pot. The earth bore the marks of struggle, footprints in the mud, a scorched brand cooling in the dirt, blood where knuckles had met bone. Sir Caedmon's hands were torn. She found him rinsing them at the stream, face unreadable, jaw tight. He didn't speak. He rarely did now, though his silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like witness. When she brought him cloth for the wounds, he didn't flinch as she wrapped them. She noticed the scar again, the one across his forearm, long healed but jagged, like lightning carved in flesh. She didn't ask where it came from. Instead, she said, "They'll return, with more than fire." He looked at her then, not as a protector, not as a knight, just a man worn and weathered. "I know." That evening, she found a folded letter tucked inside an old coffer. It had her husband's seal. Her heart sank before she even opened it. The parchment spoke plainly. He had arranged, before his death, to sell the cottage and surrounding land to Lord Branton, a name whispered in half-curse throughout the village. Branton held old titles, yes, but also old cruelties. Men swore he owned half the valley through debt and silence. And here it was, the proof. Eleanor stood on the porch, hands trembling as she held the letter out to Caedmon. He read it once. No change in his expression. But the way his jaw shifted, slow, deliberate, told her he understood. "This is why they spared the house," she said quietly. You knew. You knew it was Branton's mark they bore." "I served under him once," Caedmon said, voice low. "Long ago, before the border wars, before betrayal." She watched him. The firelight made his face look carved from something older than stone. "Why did you leave?" she asked. He hesitated. Then, "He left men to die. I was among them." A pause. "I lived. That was his mistake." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor said, "He'll come now, with papers and claim and law." Caedmon folded the letter, placed it on the table like a blade laid down. "Then we meet him in kind, not with steel, with truth." She swallowed. Truth doesn't hold sway in courtrooms ruled by men like him. "No," he said, "but it burns deeper than fire when spoken without fear." That night, Eleanor pulled out her best dress. Black wool, simple, once worn only for funerals. She unbraided her hair, pinned it the way she had when James still called her beautiful. "You're riding to the magistrate?" Caedmon asked. She nodded. "Alone." He didn't stop her, didn't offer to come, only said, "Wear no shame, you carry no guilt." She looked at him, at the bandaged hands, the scars he never explained, the silence he wore like armor. And for the first time, she said, "I don't want to carry it alone anymore." His gaze flickered. Then, slowly, he placed his palm over hers. not to pull her close, just to steady what trembled. There was no vow, no kiss, only a shared breath in the stillness, a promise made without words. She rode alone, down the rutted road where hawthorns leaned like old eavesdroppers, across the narrow stone bridge that creaked under her mare's weight. The sky hung low, pale and watchful. By the time Eleanor reached the town square, the bells of morning had not yet rung. But still, the square was busy. And he was there, Lord Branton, wearing his usual colors, a deep crimson cloak trimmed with black fur, boots too polished for mud. He stood with a hand on his sword hilt, flanked by his retainers, their chainmail dull with travel. His eyes lit with a smile, as false as coin dipped in tin. "I feared you might not come," he said smoothly. Eleanor dismounted. She did not curtsy. "I bring no challenge," she said, "only a truth that hasn't yet been buried." The gathered villagers parted as she stepped toward the magistrate's bench. Judge Marrow, an aging man with ink-stained fingers and heavy lids, peered down at her over the rim of his spectacles. She unrolled the letter and placed it on the table. "My husband intended to sell our land," she said, steady, "but he never signed. The seal is unbroken, and Lord Branton has no claim save words and threats." Branton's expression didn't falter, not at first, but his jaw shifted just so. "You dishonor your husband's final wishes," he said. "I question whether they were truly his," she replied. The judge read the parchment carefully, his brow furrowed. "There's no completed contract," he said at last. "Intent is not ownership." Branton took a step forward. "This is nonsense. She lodges a disloyal knight in her stables, undermines the crown's order." Eleanor's voice cut through. "I gave water to a man bleeding to death by my stream." Branton turned on her. "And now you harbor him? Feed him? Lie beside him?" The crowd rippled. Eyes turned. Some looked away. Others stared too long. She didn't blink. "That night has harmed no one. But 5 men came by torchlight to burn my home." He drove them back with restraint. No bloodshed. No blade raised first. From the edge of the crowd, a child whispered, "I saw the fire. My mother wouldn't let me speak of it." Judge Marrow raised a hand. "Lord Branton, without proper seal, your claim falls to dust." Branton's face darkened. "You'll regret this." His hand moved, too fast, too reckless. A dagger was drawn. The crowd gasped. But before the blade could lift, a figure stepped forward. Caedmon. He had arrived unseen, silent as wind, cloak drawn, one hand bare. And in 3 swift strides, he was between Eleanor and the Lord. Branton raised his dagger. Caedmon did not flinch. He caught the Lord's wrist with a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed by the seasons. Twisted. Not to break, just to remind. Branton dropped the dagger. A hush fell. The judge stood. "This is not your hall, Branton, nor your land." Branton wrenched himself free and stepped back. His eyes seethed, but he said nothing more. By noon, the deed had been sealed. Eleanor's land was hers, written in ink, signed and witnessed. As they rode home, she said nothing. Caedmon did not speak either, only kept pace beside her, a quiet presence. But when they reached the edge of her fields, and she dismounted to walk the last stretch, he fell in beside her. She looked up at him. "You came. I said I would remain until you were safe. And now?" He paused. "You did not need me today, but I came because I wanted to." A long silence passed. Then she said softly, "I don't know what comes next." He answered, "We meet it together." The days grew long again. The hens began to lay. The grass returned in patches where the fire had licked it bare. And the cottage, though still crooked, still poor, no longer felt hollow. Caedmon stayed. He never asked, never assumed. He rose before the sun, fetched water, tended the beams, repaired the gate. When he hunted, he brought back only what they needed. When he ate, he waited for her to begin first. He still slept in the barn, though the hearth inside was warm. No villagers came to trouble her now. But they watched. Eyes from windows, murmurs behind walls. Some still whispered, but others began to nod in passing. An old man left a bundle of firewood at the edge of her field. A boy brought her eggs. No apology, no confession. But something quieter, a kind of permission. One night, after a supper of lentils and black bread, she stepped outside to find him sitting beneath the hawthorn tree, carving something from a pale branch of ash. She sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "What are you making?" she asked. "A memory." "For whom?" He didn't look up. "You?" She blinked. "Why?" He turned the carving in his hand, small, bird-like, wings just beginning to form. "You gave me water," he said. "Then you gave me choice." She watched his fingers work the knife. "What choice?" "To stay." Her voice was quieter. "No one else would have." He glanced at her, then back to the carving. "You would." It was not flattery. It was a fact. She smiled faintly. "James, my husband, once said kindness would be the end of me, that it made me soft, weak." Caedmon didn't answer. He didn't need to. So she continued. "He wasn't cruel, just distant. Thought love was duty, not presence." The carving took shape. A hawk, wings extended, beadwork already tied to its base. "And you?" he asked. She hesitated. "I thought if I worked hard enough, if I proved I was good enough, someone might love me back. I thought I had to earn it." He placed the carving gently in her hand. "You were always worthy." The words struck her deeper than any insult ever had, not because they were bold, but because he believed them. The next morning, she found the hawk resting on her windowsill, a token without demand. That evening, as the air cooled and a hush fell over the land, she stood by the well where she had first found him. He stepped beside her. "This is where it began," he said. She nodded. "You were ready to die?" "I had nothing left," he said. "But you gave water." She turned toward him. "I didn't do much." He looked down at her. "You did everything." He reached into the pouch at his side and unwrapped a small bundle. Inside, a necklace of dark beads, bone and wood and polished stone, woven with a single raven feather and a carved token, shaped like a wave. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "What does it mean?" "Water is spirit," he said. "To my people it is memory. To offer it is to bind souls. The feather means freedom. The wave means you are not alone." She held it carefully, reverently. "I made it for you," he added, "but only if you choose it." She looked up at him. His face held no expectation, only steadiness. "I choose," she said. From that day, the land shifted, not with noise, but with grace. The village no longer stared quite so long. A woman brought herbs for her garden. The priest did not speak when she entered the chapel, but he did not turn his back either. Sheriff Merrow passed by one morning, removed his hat. "No one's raising claim anymore," he said. "No petitions, no riders sent. I thought you should know." She offered him a nod. Nothing more. Before he left, he glanced toward the barn where Caedmon knelt, mending the cartwheel. "He's staying long?" Eleanor looked. Caedmon did not notice. He was focused, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed in thought. "He already belongs," she said. That night they sat by the fire. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The life before?" He took his time before answering. "Yes," he said. "But this is something new." She closed her eyes. Outside, the wind rustled the heather. The stars blinked in the hush of night. And in the well, the water shifted quietly below, clear, cold, and unafraid. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more tales. I chose another video for you on the screen.